any state or any country to debate them. So that's the challenge.
Now, I have an Associated Press article here where for months you challenged the FDA to have someone debate you.
EPA,
EPA. And they refused, but let you speak, and no one came to debate you. Why is that?
Yeah, they tried for 6 weeks. They tried the ADA, they tried the CDC, the FDA, throughout the EPA, dentists, academia. They couldn't find one single person to do it. So
now, you're a chemist by training, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell folks a little bit about your medical training at the prestigious Cambridge University and Dartmouth.
Yeah, I did my first degree in natural sciences at Cambridge, and I did a PhD in inorganic biochemistry. I looked at the mechanism of action of chromium, chromate, a known human carcinogen. So that's my background. I teach environmental chemistry. And
what do you think of the bodybuilders then that are saying take the chromium?
Oh, yes. Chromium-3 in small quantities is necessary for sugar metabolism. So chromium is it's one of these things which is a small amount is good for you, but you want to have it as chromium-3. You do not want it as chromium-6. Chromium-6 is highly toxic.
Okay, gotcha. Since we have the world expert on that, I figure I get a comment from you.
Yeah. The second thing, Alex, is that yesterday we released publicly a petition which has been signed by over 300 scientists and activists from 38 different countries calling for integrity in this issue. There are 6 points that we make. They're not doing independent and objective reviews. Governments are not doing. They're not collecting the right data. They're not collecting bone levels of fluoride, even though they know it accumulates there. They are attempting to intimidate scientists and government officials who come out against fluoridation. They are using industrial waste instead of pharmaceutical grade, and also they're exaggerating the benefits like crazy, and of course they're refusing to debate.
Now, there was a doctor who was for fluoridation in Canada, and I was reading the article a few weeks ago.
Yes.
He suddenly came out and said, I was wrong, I apologize.
Yep, Dr. Hardy Lineback, and this is not your average dentist. Dr. Hardy Lineback is the head of preventive dentistry at the University of Toronto and the former president of the Canadian Association for Dental Researchers. He is one of the leading dental researchers in Canada. He was once an avid promoter of fluoridation. He was the Canadian Dental Association's chief spokesman on issues pertaining to fluoridation.
Well, the Toronto Star said he was the guy that got fluoride put in the water.
Yeah. So he is somebody who's changed, because he's got integrity. That's what we're talking about, integrity. And in fact, Dr. Hardy Lineback was one of the scientists that helped me.
Well, that takes a lot of integrity to come out and say you're wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And before him, John Cahoon in New Zealand did the same thing. But he was one of the people that organized this petition, which is calling for these steps that have to be taken, whether you're for fluoridation.
Now, what website do you recommend for the best information and medical reports?
I think the best one would be www.S for sugar, L for Larry, slweb.org. And if you go to that, there's a complete annotated bibliography on all the medical health studies and so on.
We could save a lot of lives if every listener printed this stuff off and delivered it to your dentist and said, why are you still giving fluoride treatments? Why are you still coming to the schools and passing this garbage out? Why are you part of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Why won't you debate it? If you think it's so good, how come you can't defend it? My mother told me, it doesn't matter, son, she says, it doesn't matter what you believe, but my goodness, you should be prepared to defend it. And the moment you can't defend an idea, that's the day you should give it up. Well, these guys are avidly promoting something that they can't defend, and that's just unacceptable to me as a citizen and as a scientist. One other piece of information which is critically important, Alex. It was shown in 1997 and published in 2001 that fluoride accumulates in the human pineal gland. For years and years and years, the dentists and others have been telling people that fluoride only impacts the hard tissues, the bones and the teeth.
Now we're talking about the seat of the soul.
That's right. That's good for you. That's Descartes, yes. It's sometimes called the penis of the brain. I think Descartes is more poetic on this. It's the center of the brain. It's not protected by the blood-brain barrier, and it's a calcifying tissue, just like the teeth and the bones, and it attracts fluoride like a magnet. And in animal studies, the same researcher, Jennifer Luke in England, has found that it lowers melatonin levels. And I'm sure you're familiar with all the studies going on with melatonin.
And then now we've got to have our Prozac and our Ritalin and...
Yep, and there are 2 steps. There are 4 steps between the natural amino acid tryptophan and melatonin production in the pineal gland. 4 enzymatic steps. The first 2 steps, you produce serotonin. You talk about Prozac. Serotonin. Prozac is designed to make serotonin that you produce more effective. And, of course, serotonin it quietens you down, so this is a way of quietening down your brain activity. But here is a substance which interferes at some point between tryptophan and the production of melatonin. It might
Wow.
It's ridiculous. If you know that, I mean, that one...
And so as you get older, that builds up.
It could do, and I mean, this could affect aging, it could affect the onset of puberty, or jet lag, sleep patterns, you name it. It's a very, very important system, the pineal gland, and melatonin, incredibly important, regulating substance.
Well, Doctor, I got to stop you here. I mean, I talked to this...
One more thing here. Not one single government agency in the world, in Australia, in New Zealand, in England, in Ireland, in Canada, in the United States, in Brazil, in Argentina, all the places, Singapore, the countries that fluoridate, not one single government has yet to make a formal response to that piece of information, even though it was discovered in 1907 and was published in 2001. That's scandalous.
Doctor, it's massive, but, and again, every day I scan around, I see these news articles, I know it's out there. This is not debatable. It's the top scientists like yourself. This stuff just, as you said, blocks all the enzymes. It causes so many problems in the body. It goes through almost everything. It's now, they say, in the meat, in the vegetables. It's infecting the entire food supply. But I talk to scientists and doctors and people all the time, and they never speculate, which is important. You've just given us the facts. But earlier you said you're not going to... You know, I mentioned 1920s and 30s studies that I've got from universities saying it dumb people down. And then you say, well, I'm not going to get into why they do this. I mean, that is, of course, they won't respond. They won't say anything to you. But why, if you've got all these reports, these decades-old fights, why are they moving to fluoridate more, not less? I mean, why are they doing it?
Well, I think they're covering their rear ends. They do not want to admit that they're wrong, that they've been wrong for over 50 years, that they've been exaggerating like crazy. I mean, we're only saving 0.6 of one tooth surface out of 128 tooth surfaces. That's the biggest study in the country. All this angst, all these concerns I have are all apparently to save 0.6 of one tooth surface. Brunel and Carlos, 1990. It's absolutely certain.
Now, wait a minute. You just said that. And I've seen that report because I've been studying this for years.
Yeah.
That's their big number. But then you've got all the other studies that it's eating holes in people's teeth, and we have the evidence of it. So if you took those 2 numbers, I guarantee you net effect is much more detrimental just to teeth than you had the hormones and the organs and the brain and the glands. I mean,
absolutely. But for 0.6 of a tooth, listen, they didn't even show that was statistically significant, but let's assume that it was. You are going to accumulate stuff in the pineal gland, in your bones. You're going to run the risk of lowering your children's IQ to save 0.6 of one tooth surface out of 128 tooth surfaces in a child's mouth. It's insane. No wonder these guys won't get on the same platform with the scientist who knows the issue. They'd rather do it by waving these pieces of paper in front of you. Oh, the Surgeon General says it's wonderful. I mean, they trot out the Surgeon General like Nike trots out Michael Jordan. You know, for to sell Nike shoes. If Michael Jordan says that Nike shoes are great, well, they must be good. So you bring out the Surgeon General who keeps saying it's the best thing since sliced bread.
Doctor, I've got the papers you've written. I read a bunch of the other papers, organizations, slweb.org. Have you written a book on this subject?
I'm in the process of writing a book, and last January I presented a major paper at the Institute of the International Society for Fluoride Research in New Zealand, which went through all the evidence on bone damage.
Dr. Paul Connet, I've got to get you back on in the future so that our listeners from Denver, Colorado to Austin, Texas to Rochester, New York can have a chance to hear you again, and so we can take some calls. I know there's a lot more, and as this fight develops, one last question. Have you found any way to stop cities and counties from fluoridating? Because you can have a town hall meeting where 90% of people are against it. They'll still vote for it. How do you counter that?
Well, my route is democracy. If we're going to make mistakes, let them be democratic mistakes and not bureaucratic mistakes. So I think the very minimum that you want is a referendum. But more than that, is so that you give everybody a chance to vote on it. That works if you have a chance to educate the public. But I think what we need right now is a moratorium on any more fluoridation until the scientists have resolved this issue.
All right, Dr. Paul Connet, an amazing, dynamic, intelligent person, and a chemist who has joined us, and the government will not debate him, though they have allowed him to speak to the Environmental Protection Agency. And thank you so much for coming on the show, and Godspeed.
Thanks, Alex, and I hope that we'll do this again.
Absolutely. Why